When I was a little kid, I would get on my little BMX and just say, bye mom, I'm going to ride bikes. I'll be back by dark. And about an hour and a half after the sun went down, I'd come home. My mom would be upset, and I had been riding bikes with my friends and just having a really, really fun time riding bikes. As an adult, I'm 37 years old. I can go out and explore, ride through the hills all day, just really get back to feeling like a kid again and enjoying it and having that escape from the daily grind of having to have a professional life.
What's your name?
My name's Chris Cain. I'm a Cat 2 racer, and I usually race in the 35 plus 123 and the P12.
What is the biggest difference between Masters racing and elite racing?
Masters racing, I usually know all of the guys that I'm racing against. I race against them sometimes twice a weekend or 3 times in a weekend, weekend after weekend, all year long. And you have a good idea of what someone's abilities are, who's going to be threatening in a break, which moves you have to chase down, and there's a lot of known ability out there. Also, I have a good idea of who can do what in a sprint and which guys are going to be really dangerous there at the finish. In the P12, it's a lot of young guys that I don't know, and for the most part, a lot of them are faster than me, and they can outkick me in the sprint. So,
what is your most prestigious race that you have won?
it's a funny one. A few years ago, I won the Category 4 criterium at Sea Otter Classic, and it seems ridiculous that that's the one that stands out for me, but it stands out for me for personal reasons. My dad had just passed away a few days prior, and I had a lot of pent-up emotion for that. And prior to the race, someone talked to me and said, well, why don't you dedicate your next race to your dad? And I don't think I'd even won a race prior to that, or maybe I'd won a few at the track. So I dedicated that one to my dad prior to the race, and I was off the front midway through the race, and I did a pedal strike, and I crashed, and I scraped up my elbow and my butt, and my bars were all bent, and I was about to throw my bike into the sand, and I ended up getting back in and winning that race. So for me, it was a Cat 4 criterium, but I've had other victories that were a little bit more prestigious. But for me, that's the one that stands out.
Track versus road?
I love them both. So a few years ago, I was evenly split. I did 30 track days and 30 road races or criteriums. And I think the following year, I did maybe 40 on the road and 20 on the track. And it's just kind of gone in that direction ever since. I didn't race at all at the track this year. I totally love the track, and every year I plan on getting back into it and doing more at the track because it's super, super fun, it's addictive, and it's awesome. But right now I'm racing a lot more road. One of the best things about racing the track is you get to race maybe 3 or 4 times a night, and there's different types of races. There's races where, like a scratch race is basically like a crit, whoever wins, wins, but there's also points races where you are going to sprint 5 times or 10 times throughout the race. There's intermittent sprints throughout. For someone who's a roadie or racing criteriums, you may only get a chance to work on your sprint once in the entire race, and it's at the end. Maybe twice a weekend or just a few times a month. But if you're going to the track regularly, you get your timing down, you get your sprint down, you really get to learn your own sprint, how far out you can go, how long you can hold it, so you can get better at sprinting, and just knowing yourself.
What do you do for work?
I'm an attorney. I'm a civil litigator. I also do some criminal defense.
How do you manage a full-time career plus training schedule?
I might be riding more than 40 hours a month, and to be perfectly honest, I think I've sacrificed some professional ambitions to have the lifestyle that I have. If I gave up cycling completely and just worked full-time, I'd probably make a lot more money, and I might be overweight and might not be as happy, but I've kind of made some sacrifices on both to be where I am.
So how structured is your program to make sure that you stay on track?
On the bike, it's pretty structured. I know what rides I need to get in. I know I need to ride so many hours a week. I know I need my recovery ride. I need some volume. During the latter part of this past racing season, I would do my intervals on Tuesdays or Wednesdays and just do some Tabatas to stay sharp and to bring myself to a peak for the very end of the year. Otherwise, it's just volume on the weekends, and Saturday and Sunday I try to ride as much as I can when I'm not racing.
Structured interval versus fast group ride?
Well, for a long time I was just doing the fast group rides. I didn't really get into structured intervals until more recently, and The intervals are definitely important, but there's something great about the structured group ride which simulates a race. It's a little bit out of your control to have to close down a gap or to bridge across to something, and maybe you weren't ready for that, and that wasn't part of the plan, but you end up having to dig a little bit deeper than you would have if there were nobody else around. So I can push myself a little bit harder on those group rides. Intervals are great because you know exactly what you're doing. You set out your target and you try to hit those numbers for those periods of time.
What's your favorite interval?
During the race season, I like to do Tabatas on, like I said, on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. Just do a nice 2 or 2.5 hour ride with a few 5 or 10 minute hills in there at a hard effort, and then finish it off with some Tabatas, and then ride the final 5 or 10 miles home at a really, really easy pace.
How long have you been meatless?
Since 2007.
What made you go that route?
I had a kidney stone, and it probably had nothing to do with the meat that I was eating, but it was a scary thing to have that kidney stone and feel a lot of pain and not really know what it was at first. After that, I took inventory of the food that I was eating, and I started looking at food as fuel and not just something to get me through the day. Just started trying to eat more healthy. I think that there's 3 main arguments for a meatless diet. There's environmental arguments, there's health reasons, and then there's ethical reasons. For me, initially, it was health. But the more I learned about it, the more I learned about the environmental and the ethical reasons. And all 3 arguments carry good weight.
One tip would you give them, or like a resource that they could?
My tip would be to just give it a shot. After about a week of not eating meat, my skin felt cleaner. I felt lighter and I felt fresher. So right away, I felt some positive benefits from it.
How close to vegan are you?
I actually don't think about it too much. I know I'm not eating much meat or any meat at all. I know I'm not eating a lot of animal products, but I make that decision, and a vegan diet lines up with that for the most part, but I might be a little bit too lazy or may not have the time or mental energy to fully cut out butter or fully cut out products that if I'm eating out, that they may have used those products to make the meal that I'm eating.
If you could break up your year chunks of training, what would that look like?
And I do that, and I did that last year. My training is broken into training blocks. It's periodized across the entire year, and then also about month-long blocks of 3 weeks build up, 1 week rest. And I try to punctuate those training blocks with training camps. And I've found that there's a lot of different training camps throughout the year. My team's had camps, other teams have camps. There's a training camp down in San Luis Obispo. There's a coast ride that goes from San Francisco all the way down the coast. And then there's just other little 3-day weekends along the way that I put in towards the end of one of those blocks. So I'm always building up towards a block, and then after the end of a big block, I take a rest week.
Outline your rest week.
Just easy rides. I may take 1 day completely off the bike, maybe 2 if I'm really, really tired. Otherwise, it is 1 hour rides or just a little over an hour. I have a loop by my house which goes through a nice park into Pebble Beach, then along the coast, and I come home, and that's my up and over route, and that's my easy recovery ride, just about an hour, maybe a little longer, a little shorter. I do that for 5 days in the week or 6 days.
What's your most impressive power stats?
In a criterium, I don't have the longest sprint. A lot of guys can sprint for a lot longer, but I can accelerate really, really quickly. So my 1 or 2 or 3 second power is pretty good. At the Chico stage race this past year, I had a pretty good time trial. I came in 5th in the time trial.
What are those actual power numbers?
Right, I was around 170 pounds at the time, and I did over 350 watts on the time trial bike, and that was good enough for 5th. I think mathematically that's around 4.5 watts per kilogram. And I know a lot of people talk about watts per kilo, and they think that you need to be above 5 or above 6, something crazy like that. I don't pay too much attention to that. For me, the proof is in the pudding. Racing against 70 or 80 guys of the best masters racers in Northern California, there were national champions and world champions in my field. I was able to get 5th place at 4.5 watts per kilogram for the time trial. That was good enough for me.
What's your favorite memory?
I've had some good memories. I have a lot of good things. I think that for me, one of the reasons, and this gets back to why I even like riding bikes in the first place, like I like to go exploring on the bike. There are some beautiful places in California where you can go and ride. When I was a little kid, I would get on my little BMX and just say, "Bye mom, I'm going to ride bikes. I'll be back by dark." And about an hour and a half after the sun went down, I'd come home. My mom would be upset, and I had been riding bikes with my friends and just having a really, really fun time. riding bikes. As an adult, I'm 37 years old. I can go out and explore, ride through the hills all day, just really get back to feeling like a kid again and enjoying it and having that escape from the daily grind of having to have a professional life.
What's the average pace, mile per hour, for some of the crits that you do?
28 would be pretty high. And I think it depends on the criterium. If it's like Cat's Hill, a California Classic criterium I think it's a 15 or 16% hill that you go up every single 1 mile lap. You go up a block that's just a wall that you have to climb up. That's going to be a lot slower than one of our local series in California called Red Kite, which is an industrial park crit, and I think you gain 1 or 2 feet of elevation every lap. So it really depends on the course, what's going on. If there's 180s and a big hill, it's going to be a lot slower than a wide open, more of a NASCAR shaped course.
Do you think there's anything they could do to make crit racing more safe?
I'm actually the coordinator of the Northern California Nevada Cycling Association's mentoring program. So when I first started racing, I went through a program in Northern California called the Early Birds, and it's a January race series. And every weekend throughout the month of January, new racers can go and they go through a clinic, and the clinic will focus on either cornering or pack riding or sprinting or some skill. You do a skills clinic and then you race a criterium. And these criteriums were mentored. And these mentors throughout the season get assigned to races, and they race along with the Cat 5 men or Cat 4 women, and they ride with them, and then after the race they do a post-race debrief. This type of mentoring and this peer mentorship and getting guidance from more experienced racers, I think, is critical to having safer races. It also helps in rider retention for the new racers. And if you start really early with the Cat 5 guys and you teach them good skills early, then those guys are going to stick around. They're going to move through the ranks and come up and eventually be Cat 1 racers or 35 plus Masters racers or what have you. So having those skills early on will make things safer. My name's Chris Cain, and in 2016 I raced for the Don Chapin Monterey Bay Racing Team. 2016 I won the Best All-Around Racer in the 35 plus 1-2-3 category. I also won the California Cup Series, and I won 11 races with 10 second place finishes and I think 10 third place finishes and something like 42 times in the top 5.